Woke up quick at about noon.
It's the podcast with Damian Barling, presented by Vibe Health Bar, Sacramento's premier superfood cafe with locations in East Sacramento, Oak Park, and Folsom. Vibe Health Bar is where busy people go to achieve vibrant health. For more info, stalk us at Vibe Health Bar. Thank you so much for downloading the podcast here. I am Damian Barling. Plenty to get to here today. If you want to be a part of the show, many ways that you could do it. Our 24/7 text line, no matter what time of day, morning, night you are listening to this, you can shoot us a text and react to anything that's going on here. 916-888-5898. You can also search Damian Barling in Facebook, like that page there. We've got a number of conversations going on all throughout the day, and of course on Twitter and Instagram as well at Damian Barling. We can go ahead and hit our unofficial theme music for free agency here. So the latest one here seems to be the one that's getting a lot of run early here on this Thursday morning, is that things aren't going so well with Kemba Walker and the Charlotte Hornets. And suddenly, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, the Boston Celtics have emerged as the front runner to sign Kemba Walker when free agency officially gets underway on Sunday. And I state that point officially because I really feel like there's going to be a whole lot of deals announced within the first few minutes of that 3 p.m. time slot here, at least 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday. I personally love the idea of the Boston Celtics and Kemba Walker marrying together. I love this. So one of the questions that I was going to throw at you before this story broke, I guess it was the rumblings started late last night and they continued into early this morning, where apparently the gulf between the Charlotte Hornets and Kemba Walker was too much. There was too much of a gap between the two. There was too much of a gap between what Kemba Walker wanted and what the Charlotte Hornets were willing to give. And the question I was actually going to ask was, are the Charlotte Hornets going to offer Kemba Walker a supermax because he's eligible for it? And it seemed like the obvious answer was no, simply because they tried to trade Kemba Walker. As a matter of fact, they did trade Kemba Walker. But did someone fail their physical or something happened, or maybe the rumor was just really strong and it wound up not happening. But I remember Kemba Walker being emotional about potentially leaving Charlotte and all of that. And if a team is willing to trade their best player, I'd have to think that same team isn't willing to give them the biggest contract that their sport offers. In the meantime, the Boston Celtics seem more than willing to extend a 4-year, $141 million offer to the three-time All-Star. I've been a huge Kemba Walker fan since he was at Connecticut. I love this marriage. I love this group. I'm increasingly loving the Boston Celtics. They might be my favorite. I can say this now. The Boston Celtics are going to be my favorite team next year. The Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Clippers. But more the Celtics than the Clippers. It'll be close, but the Boston Celtics are going to be my favorite team next year. I love the idea of Kemba Walker playing with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and I love the idea of this group being able to do something without Kyrie Irving there, because it feels like I think it's silly to say it feels like, it seems to be very obvious that there were some chemistry issues with Kyrie Irving in that locker room. Now, I've said this before, a number of people associated with the Boston Celtics have told us that they all got along fine, which is great, but there were clearly chemistry issues on the floor. And with Kyrie Irving out of there, now the one thing this almost certainly does mean is that Terry Rozier won't be back with the Boston Celtics. And once they extend this offer, they're going to have to, or I take that back. Once Kemba Walker accepts this offer, if everything that we hear is true, and the Celtics are going to extend a 4-year, $141 million offer, they're going to have to fill out the rest of the roster. But I like their odds of doing that. I actually thought of a center that might work pretty well with them. And it would solve the issues of a lot of Sacramento Kings fans as well. I don't know how much money they would be willing to throw at him, but Willie Cauley-Stein, I think, would fit really well there in Boston too. Because now you've got Kemba, you've got three guys who can run the floor very efficiently. Vines is going to be gone. Al Horford is going to be gone. There's a spot there for Willie Cauley-Stein. He is athletic. With all of the negatives that Kings fans say about Willie Cauley-Stein, there really are a lot of positives. And he doesn't have to be, I saw the the statement that his agent made, and we documented that very, very well this week and in depth on numerous occasions. But one line particularly stood out in that statement from Rock Nation, and it was, Willie Cauley-Stein didn't get the opportunity to lead the franchise the way that he wanted to. Well, there's no way Rock Nation believes that Willie Cauley-Stein is the leader of a franchise. And maybe that's just a line to help get them out of Sacramento. Maybe that's just a line to save face if Sacramento decides they don't even want to extend the qualifying offer. Because there's that scenario, and I'm not sure that we spend enough time covering that. Because this is gamesmanship. This is gamesmanship by the agency, by Rock Nation, and it's gamesmanship by the Sacramento Kings as well. Rock Nation may know very well that the Sacramento Kings aren't going to extend a qualifying offer. They can get out in front of this and sort of protect Willie Cauley-Stein in this moment. Like Vlade told us, well, we don't really know if we're going to extend a qualifying offer. We don't really know what we're going to do with Willie Cauley-Stein. We're probably going to wait till Sunday to make that decision or whatever the deadline is for them to extend that qualifying offer. And Rock Nation saw that as like, okay, I can't have my client hit the free agency market thinking that a sub 500 team doesn't want him. So I'm going to get out ahead of this, and I'm going to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, we all need a fresh start. The Kings need a fresh start. Willie needs a fresh start. Let's just cut ties. Don't extend the qualifying offer. Let's move along. It's posturing, and it's brilliant. No matter what you think of it, even if it offends you as a Sacramento Kings fan, it's the brilliant play. It's what Rock Nation has to do to protect their client. There's got to be there could be a number of reasons why that statement was issued. So what are the Kings willing to pay him, if they're willing to pay him at all, and what would the Boston Celtics be willing to offer him? I think there are a lot of teams that Willie Cauley-Stein fits with. But as you start to see these teams take shape, what starting five couldn't use an athletic big man that can run the floor? Now, I know the flaws are protecting the rim. I know the flaws are getting more rebounds. But in terms of running the floor and being high active with an offense, Boston is a good fit. I really do believe he's going to have a number of suitors. Because, Boston isn't a landing place for DeAndre Jordan. And when you look at the other centers in the league, it's not there. Obviously, Al Horford's not going to be in Boston. So you go and you look through all of these different big men, and no, that doesn't really fit. You could talk about Dedmon if you want to. All right. Enes Kanter, he can rebound. Sure. He doesn't run the floor particularly well. And maybe Brad Stevens will run a slower paced offense. Oh, okay. That's fine. But when you've got Kemba Walker, when you've got guys who are capable of scoring at the rate that those guys are capable of scoring, I love the idea of Kemba Walker. I mean, I admire the fact that he wanted to stay in Charlotte. I admire the fact that he was super emotional when he thought he was going to leave Charlotte. But I'm also, just as a basketball fan who doesn't have any real allegiance to a team, I try not to be a fan. I mean, the team that's most important to me is obviously the one in Sacramento, but I try not to talk basketball as a Kings fan. I just try to talk basketball as a fan of the game. As a fan of the game, I'm very excited to see Kemba Walker out of Charlotte. I'm very excited to see Kemba Walker with an A-plus organization and a coach that I still believe in. And I know Brad Stevens took a lot of flack, and that was a question that we posed a number of times throughout the regular season and even into the postseason. Is so much talk about Kyrie Irving, so much talk about plane rides, so much talk about chemistry. How much of this falls on Brad Stevens? And now you've heard some rumblings about Brad Stevens trying to force Gordon Hayward into the lineup and trying to force those situations on the players that they really didn't think it was working. And it's, you've got to take all of that in. But in the end, I still believe that Brad Stevens is a very, very, very good coach. And I think once that Kyrie Irving dynamic is gone, once you, to a certain degree, have cleaned up that locker room a little bit, I think this team has a very high probability of finishing near the top of the Eastern Conference next year. And if my initial thought that Kawhi Leonard is heading to Southern California, they have a very real possibility of winning the Eastern Conference next year. Because I think if Kawhi Leonard, for some reason, comes back and stays in Toronto and kind of and I do believe it is defying the odds here at this point. I think if he stays in Toronto, I think Toronto has to be a favorite to win the Eastern Conference again. Philadelphia is going to be a question mark because there's probably going to be a lot of roster turnover there. So much talk about Jimmy Butler and extending him the 5-year max, which I just can't imagine Philadelphia doing. I know all of the insiders who know significantly more and way more connected than I am have said they believe that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to offer Jimmy Butler that 5-year max contract, and all of this talk about what the Houston Rockets want is irrelevant. Philadelphia's they're going to be in a. I mean, if Philadelphia offers Jimmy Butler the 5-year max, they have to win a title within like the next year or two, preferably the next year, because they're going to start entering salary cap hell. They're going to start entering luxury tax hell, and luxury tax hell is a fine place to be if you're winning championships. I think Joe Lacob will sit in hell. He will sit in luxury tax hell as long as he keeps winning rings. He will sit in luxury tax hell as long as that new Chase Arena is filled. But if you're the Philadelphia 76ers and it's just, the process is ongoing over and over and over and over again, you can't be there. It's like the Houston Rockets. The Rockets just continue to bury themselves because they can't make a decision on what they want to do. They didn't want to bring very key players back from 2 years ago into their lineup because they didn't want to be deep into the penalty, deep into the luxury tax. And then they lose again to the Golden State Warriors at home. And the owner comes out and bitches and complains about it and says it's unacceptable. Well, the unacceptableness starts with you. You can't complain about not having the right roster. You can't complain about not having the depth when you had it and you didn't want to bring them back. So they're teetering on, well, we can't make up our mind. When you're on that cusp of being a great team and you're on that cusp of that luxury tax, you've got to make a decision and you have to stick with it. We're going into the luxury tax and we're doing it because we believe we're going to win. Miami did it. Cleveland did it. Cleveland, I mean, that no one can. There's a lot you can say about Dan Gilbert, but you can't say, particularly in that second stint of LeBron James in Cleveland, that he didn't try to accumulate players. He didn't not pay. I mean, he was giving guys the money. Now, giving Kevin Love the money, it looks a little different now than it did back then. But at the time, you had to do it. You had to pay Kevin Love. You had to pay Kyrie Irving. Obviously, you've got LeBron in there now, and you've got to surround LeBron James with LeBron James-like players. And he spent, and he went into the luxury tax, and he paid that penalty for 4 years straight. And then when he realized, well, LeBron's gone, we don't really have a chance here. Let's see what we can do. We'll max out Kevin Love. Some of these other contracts are falling by the wayside here, and we'll try to build a team around Kevin Love a week into the season. Well, that was a bad idea. Okay, so let's just see if we can blow this whole thing up. And I'm still of the mindset Kevin Love isn't going to be on the Cavs next year. He's certainly not going to be on them past February. They've got to get out of that contract and let him move on, and he's got to get out of there. Cleveland has been a horrible, horrible place for Kevin Love. That man has got to get out of there. But it's a decision that you make as an owner. We're going into the cap and we're going to pay for it. Philadelphia is going to have to make this decision. They can't teeter on the fence. Because when you teeter on the fence, you get eliminated in game 7s. Or 6s or 5s or 4s. You get eliminated. You don't win championships. It's a tough spot where the Oklahoma City Thunder are at. Because they're in luxury tax hell. But they don't have a championship team. It feels like they should. And I know I've said this before, but Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, man, that really feels like a big three to me. I think very highly of Steven Adams. I think he's a good ball player. I know he makes $26-ish million. Yeah, I think he's that caliber of player. He just doesn't show it nightly. I don't know that he necessarily doesn't show it nightly. He just has to be so reactive to what the other two guys do. And Paul George almost has to be reactive to what Russell Westbrook does. So it's a weird combination of guys. And then you've got Andre Roberson, who seems to be the key to everything defensively, and that poor guy can't stay healthy. But they're in a difficult spot because you've committed to it now and you've got to run with it. You've got Paul George. You're only a year in. You've got him for a few years. You have to commit to this and you have to run with it and you have to deal with that luxury tax and you have to find a way to get it past these teams in front of you. Hell, if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, you have to figure out a way to get out of the first or second round. You've got to get deep into the playoffs. You've got to get into the Eastern Conference Finals. You've got to get into the NBA Finals. Otherwise, all these luxury taxes aren't worth it. Remember, the further you play into the season, the more money you're making, the longer your arena's open, the more home games you have, the more concessions you have, the more parking you have. So suddenly the luxury tax isn't that big of a deal. And of course, if you're getting that ring there at the end, no one cares. Joe Lacob doesn't care at all this talk about, man, can you imagine if the Warriors max out Kevin Durant and he stays, and the Warriors max out Klay Thompson and he stays, and the Warriors max out Draymond Green and he comes back next year. They're going to be paying, I think is in like 3 or 4 years, $1.2 billion in salary and luxury tax. Yeah. But with that roster, that brand new state-of-the-art arena is full, and they're playing into June every single year. They'll take it. Because that 1.4 or $1.2 billion price tag, it gets knocked down lower and lower and lower and lower the later you play into the season, because that's more money that you're making that you wouldn't be making if your season ended after game 82 or after the first round, or hell, even after the second round. You start playing deep into the finals, you're making a different type of pocketbook. You're carrying a different type of pocketbook. Now, that's what Philadelphia's got to deal with. I haven't heard one single conversation about Tobias Harris being back in Philadelphia. Not one. But you're hearing them about Jimmy Butler, and you're going to lose, I assume, J.J. Redick. J.J. Redick was a really important part to what the Philadelphia 76ers were doing last year. So they're in this weird spot where they have to commit to what are they going to do? What direction are they going to go? Commit fully. Don't teeter on the fence, because if you teeter on the fence, you're nothing more than the Houston 76ers. That's all you are. You're the Philadelphia 76ers. You're the Houston Rockets of the East. That's all you are. Because you're not going to get over that hump, because your owner's not going to be comfortable with, well, okay, let's sign this contract, but we're just going to fill it in with this, and oh man, I hope this works. Because then you're going to end up like Fertitta does after you get eliminated again. But that's why teams have capologists. That's why the Sacramento Kings have Ken Cantanella. Guys who know the money. Apparently, the Los Angeles Lakers don't have a capologist, but that's why most teams who run efficiently, that's why they have these. And I guess the Charlotte Hornets have just decided that Kemba Walker's not worth that Supermax deal. And I'm happy about that as a basketball fan, because I want to see Kemba Walker in a better situation. I hate that the Charlotte Hornets are run by the greatest basketball player that ever lived, and they're run so poorly. How does this GOAT conversation go, by the way? Because LeBron has been very vocal and very adamant. I'm going to own a team in the NBA. I'm going to be the owner of a basketball team. What if LeBron is a tremendous owner and his teams are winning titles? Does that change the GOAT conversation? Does he wind up dusting Mike because of that? Like, imagine LeBron becomes a general manager. Like, maybe his first proclamation is to draft Bronny. Like, he retires that year, Bronny's getting drafted, and that's his first gig, is he drafts Bronny and they win titles. And suddenly you have a successful general manager who later becomes a successful owner. Does any of that change the GOAT conversation, or are we confident that we're only zeroed in on basketball? Because if he's a great general manager and a great owner, that ring total grows. Mike's ring total never grew outside of playing. In fact, Mike has been mostly a punchline since becoming part of front offices and ownership groups. Kwame Brown, Washington Wizards, partial owner of the Charlotte Hornets, majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Nothing seems to be going well, and you've got Kemba Walker is a superstar, man, and you've got him on your roster, and you're going to make the decision here not to keep him. And I think part of that is because that group there knows, man, we don't know how to fill out the rest of this roster. We don't know how to convince people to come play for Charlotte. And how is Jordan not a needle mover? I mean, maybe it's too far removed from Michael Jordan being, I mean, obviously people in the league know who Michael Jordan is. Zion Williamson was born in the year 2000. So he was a baby when Jordan played his last game, and he played his last game as a Wizard. They didn't see the shot live. They didn't see the shrug live. They didn't see any of that stuff. Maybe there's no cachet to playing with Michael Jordan. Maybe Michael Jordan at this point with this class of NBA players, he's the shoe guy. And now that's not even all that prestigious because with certain organizations, with Charlotte, for example, and I think the All-Star game as well, Jordan is the logo for those teams instead of Nike. Because they're the same company, they gave Jordan the Jordan brand, the Charlotte team, and they gave him the All-Star jerseys. So there's no cachet to this anymore. But it just baffles me that he was never able to assemble a worthwhile team. You would think, you hear so much talk about Magic Johnson. I'm the deal closer. Okay. There's a lot we can say about that, but that's what he said, right? Like, I'm the guy who closes the deals. Okay? Like, I completely get the charm of Irvin Magic Johnson. Shouldn't Mike be the deal closer? Like, you walk into a room and there's Michael Jeffrey Jordan, you're not even... Does that even phase professional basketball players anymore in 2019? Basketball players who were born in the year 2000? Basketball players who were born after Mike hit that shot in Utah? It doesn't feel like he has any pull. I feel like Jordan's the shoe guy. That's what he is. Because anything else he is in terms of the NBA is just a questionable owner and a terrible general manager. And there's so much talk about how competitive he is. How come this stuff hasn't translated to being an owner? How come this stuff hasn't translated to building a team? He can't close deals. He can't get it done. Now he's going to lose the best player that's played for him. So we talked about the 5-year contract that the Philadelphia 76ers, according to a number of insiders, are looking to extend to Jimmy Butler. Well, remember, as we talked about yesterday, the Houston Rockets are trying to find a way for the Philadelphia 76ers to sign Jimmy Butler. But for them, they want to convince the 76ers to then trade him to them being the Houston Rockets, of course. And we had a brief discussion on this yesterday, how the Houston Rockets have been kind of looking over the landscape of the NBA, looking at teams that have available cap space and looking to move Clint Capella and Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker. And obviously that sparked a lot of conversation with Sacramento Kings fans because the Kings have cap space. There's always a belief that a high-end free agent isn't going to sign here. All three of those guys are very quality players. They're all very different players, but they're all very quality players. And before we touch on each one of them, I just want to, it cracks me up listening to people talk about Clint Capella here this morning. I was listening to, I think it might have been Jalen Rose, and he was talking about how great this deal would be for Houston. It's awesome that maybe, they could acquire Jimmy Butler, but the best thing that could possibly happen to them is that they get out of this Clint Capella contract, which I think is 4 years, $66 million. There's $66 million left on this contract. $66 million left on the contract for Clint Capella. Suddenly after the playoffs now, suddenly we're talking about him as if he's nothing. It's like the Chris Paul effect. There was all of this slander around Chris Paul because of the contract that he made and talking about how absurd it is for Chris Paul to make this amount of money headed into his 30s. Well, suddenly Clint Capella isn't worth the $66 million because it was just last offseason or the offseason. Yeah, I think it was last offseason where you were talking about they've got to get him signed. They've got to get him locked up. He's an important part of what they're doing. He's the big that they need. He's the big that Chris Paul needs to run the floor with. Suddenly you don't want him? Suddenly he's a bad player? Suddenly, now, to be fair, the Golden State Warriors rendered him, at least for 3 of the 6 games, completely useless. Particularly the first 2. Clint Capella was 100% useless in the first 2 games against the Golden State Warriors. But I don't believe that is 100% Clint Capella's fault. Where's your coach in that situation? Where is your coach watching what's going on the floor going, oh, man, we've got to make an adjustment here because they're doing A, B, C, and D to Clint Capella. They're putting him in difficult spots. We have to switch this up. We've got to come up with a different game plan for Clint Capella. Maybe you don't spot it after the first game. Fine. Okay. Second game, maybe you can't get it then? Now, he was a little bit more effective in game 3, but he was virtually up and down the entire series, mostly down. And he took the brunt of that instead of Mike D'Antoni. Because isn't that where great coaches are supposed to come into play? Isn't that what great coaches are supposed to do? Adjust their game plan? Isn't that what great coaches, they go back and they look at the film and they go, man, he is our third most important player. We have to get him more active. He does something on the offensive and defensive side of the ball that we don't think the Golden State Warriors can deal with. We have to make him more effective. What can we do to make him more effective? What can we do to counter the scheme that they've got to make Clint Capella so useless? They never figured it out. And if they did, then it is Clint Capella's fault because he wasn't able to implement what his coaches were telling him to do. But watching all 6 of those games, it sure didn't look like anything changed. It just looked like in some games he got his hands on a few more rebounds. On some games he got a few more open shots. And particularly in some games he just had a few more breakaways. He was able to get out in front of the court. Chris Paul was able to find him. Remember the Chris Paul effect when it comes to field goal percentage. Leading into this year, and I haven't checked to see who I have to imagine it wouldn't be Clint Capella given how much time that Chris Paul made. But the Chris Paul effect in terms of field goal percentage is the player who leads the league in field goal percentage has been Chris Paul's big man for like the last 6 years. It was DeAndre Jordan, then it was Clint Capella. There was no one else. It was DeAndre Jordan. Everyone said all he does is catch lobs. All he does is catch lobs. Yep. That's what he did. And he did it really effectively. A lob is still 2 points. Now, I know we're in a league now of nothing but 3-pointers, but still, he was pretty damn effective at what his job was. Clint Capella did the same thing. But suddenly now Clint Capella makes $66 million over the next handful of years, and they've got to get out of under that contract. Because you've said, we have all heard it. You got to get out from Clint Capella's contract. You got to get out of Chris Paul's contract. Well, what the hell are the Houston Rockets then if you don't have Clint Capella or Chris Paul? You're James Harden running around scoring a bunch of points and people acting like that's impressive. It's not. Oh, he single-handedly carried them. Okay, good. What'd it get you? He sure didn't single-handedly carry you in Game 6. Chris Paul did. Chris Paul played one of the best playoff games of his life in Game 6. And it'll all fall in history because they lost. It'll just be another L in a season-deciding game. And then you'll look at James Harden's stat going, man, how did they lose this game? Because you don't realize, looking at stats or a box score, that James Harden's points through that entire second half were useless. None of them meant anything. We always talk about impactful baskets. We talked about this with Joel Embiid in his playoff run last year. He had moments of impact. DeMarcus Cousins against the Toronto Raptors, that game 2 that they won, impactful baskets. He only had 8 points? Every single one of those points mattered. Every single one of those points was impactful. James Harden did nothing of impact. But now people are bitching and complaining about Chris Paul's contract and about Clint Capella's contract. Well, whose fault's that then? That's Daryl Morey, the old media charmer. People love Daryl Morey because he just says whatever the hell is on his mind. And nobody loves that more than the media. You want that soundbite. You always want that soundbite. And that's what 2019 media is. It's sound bites. It's a clip that you can put on Instagram. It's a clip that you can put on Twitter. We'll get back to that in just a second. But we've got Clint Capella out there, Eric Gordon out there, and PJ Tucker out there. So I'll ask you this. As a large portion of this audience so far of the podcast is in Northern California, we're all basketball fans. We're all familiar with the Sacramento Kings. Who fits best with this Sacramento Kings roster? Clint Capella, Eric Gordon, or PJ Tucker? You're going to have to give up something for him. And my belief has always been, we used to have a conversation. I don't even know if this conversation ever made it to the air. But I know Jason and I used to have this conversation off the air all the time about who would be kind of that J. Will sacrificial lamb. Like, who would be that Jason Williams sacrificial lamb? Who would that guy be that the Kings fans love but would have to be traded in order for this team to take the next step. And I always thought the most obvious answer for me, like the answer was easy for me, and I thought it was rather obvious. Bogdanovic. You trade Bogey. And if any one of those guys are coming in, I'm assuming Bogey's going to have to be a part of that. And if he's not, if the Kings are able to land any one of these 3 Houston Rockets, and I believe each and every one of them can be of value to the Sacramento Kings. If Vlade and that front office are able to land one of those 3 without moving Bogey, man, Vlade's doing a hell of a job. If you're able to dump Nemanja Bjelica and, I don't know, just keep Vlade from trading draft picks 4 years in advance. Let's not do that this time. But if he's able to acquire one of those Houston Rockets without giving up Bogey, man, that's pretty damn impressive. That is pretty impressive. But I think all of them work here. Obviously, Clint Capella comes in. That means Willie Cauley-Stein is gone. You got Eric Gordon coming in. He's another sharpshooter to go along with Buddy Hield. And then P.J. Tucker. Kings fans want a player with grit and nastiness. Well, P.J. Tucker's got it. Oh, speaking of P.J. Tucker, hold up. Can we hit this real quick? This is our official clown behavior music. If you guys don't subscribe to The Athletic yet, you need to. The Athletic is absolutely, it's a fantastic website. I know we're so used to getting our sports information for free. So when it comes to dropping $2.99, $4.99, $5.99, whatever that is a month, for The Athletic, it gets difficult, but it is so worth it. And our buddy Sam Amick spoke with P.J. Tucker following the NBA awards show. Can I give you this quote while the music is still playing from P.J. Tucker talking about the dysfunctions? Because Sam Amick, P.J. Tucker was trying to draw a comparison between the Rockets infighting and Kobe and Shaq. And Sam was quick to point out, like, there's some difficulties in that comparison. Well, P.J. Tucker responded as such. They won championships together, right? And that's what people care about, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Nah, we're talking about winning championships, right? So that's all that matters, to win a championship. That's it. Nothing else matters. If we win a championship together and we effing hate each other, then guess what? Who cares? Nobody, right? So that's all that matters. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. Winning a championship. Everything else is a failure. I read that verbatim. That was a direct quote from P.J. Tucker in the Athletic column with Sam Amick. Yeah, but y'all didn't win, though. See, you can't draw comparisons to you and Shaq, or you can't draw comparisons to your team and Kobe and Shaq, when you didn't win. Not only did you not win 1, Kobe and Shaq won 3. That is the worst comparison ever. Oh, Kobe and Shaq did it. Like, why can't we do it? What was the other line he used? Oh, I argue more with James and Chris than Chris and James argue. Okay. Good. That's cool. That's fine. Kings fans love an agitator, right? They want that guy with the grit. PJ Tucker is that guy. But to say, hey, it doesn't matter if we had won a championship, y'all wouldn't care about this. He's 100% right. If you had won a championship, no one would care. But you didn't. So it's a great story. The infighting of the Houston Rockets is a great story because the Rockets are that perpetual little brother that are just chasing their big brother in Oakland and they can't catch him. And they're humiliated year after year after year. And now they're turning on each other. That's sports media gold right there. Because leading into it, we're getting the Warriors and Rockets part 2. And oh man, all of the hot takes, it's going to be different this time. Watch out for the Houston Rockets. The Rockets get on that run in the middle of the season. James Harden is scoring all those points. James Harden's going to win back-to-back MVPs and all of this perpetual nonsense. And oh yeah, the Rockets, 2019 NBA champions, doesn't even matter who comes out of the East. Okay. How did that work? Not so well. So what's the story? Well, apparently Chris and James were pissed off at each other after Game 6. Okay, there's the story. Now you got P.J. Tucker. Doesn't deny a thing. Yeah, we're all competitive. Daryl Morey. The only thing that I think was publicly denied was Chris Paul's trade request, but nothing other than that. Every other aspect of this has never been denied except for Chris Paul's trade request. And I don't even know if anyone denied the James Harden him or me comment. Because there were 2 different articles written, I think in a span of 2 days, by 2 different reporters with 2 different networks. and we're just going to pretend like it has no validity? There's some validity to it. And we all heard, and I'm sure we all saw in our Bleacher Report alerts and all that stuff comes up that's, oh, they're denying that this Chris Paul request ever took place. Okay, has anyone denied that James Harden, hey, it's him or me? One of us got to go. I haven't heard anyone deny that yet. Not that it necessarily matters because the organizations don't have to live up to that. But it's a good story. It's a juicy story, and it's a meaty story. Again, PJ's right. We win a championship, no one cares. Well, you don't win, and you can't point out if we had won. You can't say that because a lot of people liked you to win twice, and you didn't. So with all that aside, PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, Eric Gordon. Who you like in that situation? 916-888-5898. That is the number, 916-888-5898. How about this one from Mark Stein? The Knicks are weighing the prospect of extending a considerable one-year offer to Warriors free agent big man DeMarcus Cousins if they miss out on top target Kevin Durant. It's according to league sources talking to Mark Stein. I refuse to believe Kevin Durant is going to wind up in New York. This is interesting, though. A considerable one-year offer to Warriors free agent DeMarcus Cousins. I wonder what that means. Like, what's considerable in DeMarcus' scenario? Because remember, we were once talking about DeMarcus in the realms of $20+ million, $200 million total. That was the category that he was in. What category is he in now? Like, what does considerable mean? Because he went from making, $20 million, or he was going to make $20 million a year, to making $5 million with the Golden State Warriors, suffering, a second injury when his playoff career started. And he had an impact, a positive impact in 2 of the 6 games in the NBA Finals. But again, that's 2 of 6. That's an F. Like, if you took a quiz and you got 2 right out of 6, you failed. And I think it's unfair. I still believe this, and I'm not a DeMarcus apologist, but I don't think it's fair to judge DeMarcus in that situation. An ideal scenario is the one that Kevin Durant's going to have here moving forward, particularly coming off an Achilles injury. He shouldn't have, based on when he got hurt, and when he came back, it would probably be best if he didn't play. He missed almost an entire year. I think it was just shy of an entire year. So that's when he was healthy enough to play. And he had a few practices under his belt. And I hate that we're probably going to hear stories about how it may have been a little bit difficult with DeMarcus Cousins and the Golden State Warriors because DeMarcus's personality, particularly if you're in Sacramento. He wants to get out there. He wants to play. He wants to be impactful. He's an Olympian. He's an all-star. He believes he should be playing Olympian and all-star minutes, even on the Golden State Warriors. And that was never going to be the case for him. And he had moments during the season where he was really good. He had moments during the season where he was really bad. He had moments during the NBA Finals. I would argue the 2 wins that the Golden State Warriors had, one is directly because of DeMarcus Cousins. The second one, he was a big influence in that game. He was a huge influence in that game. But is he doing 1-year deals from now on? Or is this, if he's able to knock this out the park with, let's go by this report here from Mark Stein. Let's say they don't land Kevin Durant, and I believe that they won't. And they make a large offer to DeMarcus Cousins. If he knocks it out the park, are we finally looking at a long-term deal for DeMarcus? Will DeMarcus Cousins ever get a 4-year deal? Or will it be 2? Will he get a 2-year deal? Will he have to sign, a 1-and-1 in his favor, a 1-year player option, or a 2-year player option? Are we just looking at short-term deals with DeMarcus Cousins moving forward? Here's another rumor this one has me scratching my head. Again, these are all rumors, but they're fun to talk about, right? D'Angelo Russell and the Los Angeles Lakers. So could one of you more astute basketball minds shoot me a text here at the numbers I just gave you, 916-888-5898, and explain to me how this works? D'Angelo Russell was impressive in Brooklyn, no question about that. He's improved greatly since getting out of a Los Angeles Laker uniform, no question about that. But he's a pretty ball-dominant guy, and he can facilitate. Being ball-dominant doesn't mean he's a ball hog. It means he can create offense for himself and for others. He's a great facilitator. But the Brooklyn Nets offense ran through him. And oh, by the way, the Brooklyn offense ran through him because Caris LeVert got hurt. Remember the season Caris LeVert was having before he broke his leg? Yeah, he was having a pretty good season, and everything was going through him, and then he was lost out for a big chunk of the season, and there was D'Angelo Russell to pick up the pieces. And to his credit, he did just that. But now there's all this talk about reuniting with the Los Angeles Lakers. One, it's great that Magic Johnson is gone because Magic Johnson was the one who didn't believe in him in the first place, and he was the one who dumped him to bring Lonzo Ball in. Magic's not there anymore. Okay, cool. But take into mind what I just said. He's a ball-dominant guy. He could facilitate an offense, but he's got to have the ball in his hands. How is that going to work with LeBron James? Everything runs through LeBron. And now he can create for Anthony Davis. It's not a question of whether D'Angelo Russell can create. It's just, is LeBron going to turn over the reins to allow him to do that? Because he didn't do it for Lonzo Ball. Is he really going to do it for D'Angelo Russell? Lonzo Ball's strong suit is creating for other guys. In fact, it's the best part of his game. Far and away, the best part of Lonzo Ball's game is creating for others. But that's what LeBron does. LeBron didn't let him do it. Why is he going to let D'Angelo Russell do it? Is LeBron suddenly going to change here in his 16th, 17th year? I don't think so. I don't get how this works. I don't get how this fits. And I know I've said, well, what about Kyrie Irving to the Los Angeles Lakers? If Kyrie's going to the Los Angeles Lakers, he knows exactly what to expect because he's played with LeBron before, and we've seen Kyrie change his game. He begrudgingly changed his game, but he did. Remember, there was like a week where LeBron, pouted, or I don't want to say he pouted, but he was pissed off, and he stood in the corner of every game for like a 2 or 3 game stretch and just allowed Kyrie Irving and who was it? Dion Waiters to just shoot a bunch of shots. He didn't move. He didn't do anything. He just walked back up the floor. And then he would send subtle jabs about how this team was young and they're used to losing and they're going to have to learn how to win here pretty soon. It wasn't until after that, long after that Kyrie changed his game. And then we had the big public, oh, LeBron, man, I can't believe I was that young kid who wasn't paying attention and didn't know what he was doing and all of that stuff. Okay. Well, he knows what he's walking into. I don't know that D'Angelo Russell knows what he's walking into, and I don't know that he knows how to adjust that game. The best thing that happened to him was getting out of a Los Angeles Lakers uniform. I don't like the idea of him going back. Don't like it at all. Talking about teams with cap space. Is there a rumor for Tobias Harris to the Mavericks yet? Because if not, we should start it. It seems like that's a good fit. In fact, it seems like a perfect fit. I know Sacramento has been mentioned with Tobias Harris. I feel like there should be a lot of teams lining up to have conversations with Tobias Harris. I don't know if Tobias is going to command a max deal, but I wonder if there's a bidding war for him, if that winds up being what it is. Maybe it doesn't even take a bidding war for Tobias Harris to get a max deal. He's a quality player. He's just a very low key player. And it's weird that he was the best player on the Los Angeles Clippers. And he was traded, and everyone thought, oh, the Clippers are trying to keep their lottery pick. They're tanking. And then they go on to make the playoffs. They go on to win 2 games against the Golden State Warriors. And then Tobias Harris, he went on and he played more than just fine in Philadelphia, but it was weird that he was the best player on the Clippers, and the Clippers just continued to win when he was gone. And they at least won some games in the playoffs. But I don't know if Tobias Harris to the Mavericks is a thing, but as I was looking at open cap space, I was like, oh, it could work. And no one's talking about the Pacers. I don't know why I'm so hung up on the Pacers. I think it was when I was doing the research, figuring Al Horford would be a perfect spot for Indiana. And I'm like, if they land one in, I guess it's the Pacer, way of doing things, they might land someone quietly and just wind up being really good again. They're obviously a well-run organization that's very well coached, that was able to stay well above water after their best player, Victor Oladipo, got hurt last year. But what about an addition of Thaddeus Young to them? Or what if Mirotic ends up in Indiana? I don't know why I'm trying to make the Pacers good. I have no idea. I kind of fell down a rabbit hole of looking at their roster, looking at their availability and all that stuff. And now I want them to do well. I think Nate McMillan's a great coach. I think Victor Oladipo is a high-quality player. Marc Gasol is obviously a very smart man. He accepted a one-year player option yesterday to the tune of $25.6 million. That's brilliant because no way. Absolutely no way anywhere else. I mean, he's 34 years old. He wasn't getting anything close to that anywhere else. I don't even know if he was getting a multi-year deal close to that anywhere else. So good for Marc Gasol. Stay in Toronto, collect $25.6 million, and probably still be a very valuable part of this team. Speaking of Toronto, what are the contingency plans for teams like that? What if Kawhi leaves, do they have a backup plan? Because I know Masai Ujiri was like, I'm confident Kawhi is going to be here. Okay, great. I'm confident we're going to sign Kawhi Leonard. Okay, great. That's what you say publicly. But privately, do you get in a huddle and go, okay, if Kawhi goes to Los Angeles, what are we doing? Where are we going? Who is, outside of Kawhi Leonard, who is our number one target? Who is the guy we're going after? Speaking of Kawhi Leonard, if you head over to my Facebook page, just search Damian Barling in Facebook, hit that like button, and take part in the conversations that we got going on all day long. I asked you if you could add one of these three players to your favorite team for the next 3 years. Which one would it be? I felt like I knew the answer, but I just wanted to get a gauge for how everyone was feeling. The three players were Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant. And I'm talking about this year, and everybody kind of played along fine because you've got Kevin Durant out for a year. We all know that. We're now looking at LeBron James is old, and we're looking at Kawhi Leonard here coming off the postseason he had. And I think what's fascinating about this is it plays into the theory of we always remember the last thing that we saw. And we remember it in great detail, right? The last thing we saw with LeBron James was him being hurt and the Lakers not making the playoffs. Obviously, Kevin Durant is a bit of a different situation. The last time we saw him, he was freaking incredible, but our last image of him is him hobbling off the court and then the announcement that he has a torn Achilles. And then with Kawhi Leonard, our last image of him is him winning an NBA championship, hoisting up the trophy and celebrating in the parade and ha, 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 and all of that stuff. But perhaps we're forgetting that Kawhi Leonard seemingly was banged up through a bulk of the postseason. Remember, was it a quad injury or it was some sort of upper leg injury where he started hobbling? I think it started against the Philadelphia 76ers, and it just carried on. And we had conversations about how this might be the most low-key major injury in the NBA. And I guess it was low-key because he kept playing, but you kept watching him going, man, he's hobbled. Like, he's not right. He's not 100%. Something's off here. And then there was so much talk about load management and how the Toronto Raptors handled Kawhi Leonard coming off of that injury and how they handled, sitting him out, what was it, like 20-some-odd games, 20-ish games last year. And you look at all of those things and you go, okay, so are we 100% confident that Kawhi Leonard is completely healthy? Well, the last thing that we saw is him hosting the trophy. I'm not of the mindset that LeBron James is old. Though granted, he's 34, and the question on Facebook was for the next 3 years, he's coming up to the age of 37 by the time that's over. I expected the universal answer to be Kawhi Leonard. And it, for the most part, was some people said, I'll take KD when he comes back healthy. The only thing when you talk about the next 3 years for Kevin Durant is you've got to wonder what that next season, that second season is going to look like. Because he's not playing in the first. And he has a lot of time between when the injury is, quote, healed for him to play some basketball and then get back on like the NBA court and play, at the highest level imaginable. LeBron James, he is coming off an injury. I'd argue if he had suffered that injury, and I think we know this based on things Andre Iguodala said, based on what we saw from Kevin Durant, if the Los Angeles Lakers had an opportunity to win an NBA championship, LeBron James probably would have played. He came back from that injury, and then actually, that's not true because he came back from the injury, and then he just sat out for load management, or he just sat out because he sat out for whatever reason. So I guess that doesn't even play into factor. But the last time we saw him, he wasn't even playing for the Lakers. Lakers were losing games. He wasn't playing. He was coming off an injury. So you have all that, and you go, okay, well, it's obvious that the answer is Kawhi Leonard. But is it? I mean, I get it, and that's probably where my vote would go if I said, what player do I want on my team for the next 3 years? But I'm not ready to write off LeBron James just yet. I'm not willing to do that. I think my favorite rumor so far is this one. This might be worthy. I know I've been reserving this for the Houston Rockets. This might be clown behavior worthy. As this came from Darren Wolfson. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a quote. I am told there was some dialogue with Brooklyn to see if the Nets would have some interest in a sign and trade Andrew Wiggins for D'Angelo Russell. Now, Darren goes on to say, I don't sense those talks got even a smidge off the ground. I mean, the Nets are not taking down that contract, end quote. Nobody is taking that contract. Andrew Wiggins may have, and if you think I'm wrong, text it to me, Facebook to me, Twitter it to me, Instagram it to me, whatever. Andrew Wiggins, 4 years, $122 million remaining. Is that the worst contract in the NBA? Andrew Wiggins, 4 years, $122 million. That, to me, has to be the worst contract in the NBA. It might be the worst contract in the NBA by miles. That is bad. Coming up this Saturday at Vibe Health Bar in Folsom, you can meet UFC featherweight and Team Alpha Male member Josh Emmett from 2 to 4 p.m. Incredible food and drinks, family fun, and autograph signings. UFC Sacramento is coming up July 13th at the Golden One Center, and Josh is preparing by fueling up at Vibe Health Bar, which is a staple for many in Team Alpha Male, including the Hall of Famer Uriah Faber and Cody Gromit as well. Make sure you use the promo code BarlingPodcast anytime you visit any Vibe Health Bar location for 15% off your purchase. There are 3 locations, by the way, in East Sac, Oak Park, and that one there in Folsom. Speaking of Josh, Josh Emmett is going to join us on the podcast tomorrow. So make sure you're tuned in with us. And as always, a big, big thank you to Vibe Health Bar for being the first sponsor here on the podcast with Damian Barling. This made the rounds yesterday, and we were talking about hot take behavior and sound bites and all of those different things. And I know I'm guilty of feeding into this by playing this, but take a listen to Enes Kanter here on The Herd.
So I heard a terrible thing. I love Zion Williamson.
Okay.
He can pass. He's big. He's strong. I think he's got a magnetism.
Okay.
You think he's overrated? Just say it. You can say it.
Okay.
Just say
I
it.
kind of feel like he's overhyped. I feel like he's Julius Randle with hops.
He's Julius Randle with.
That's how I believe.
By the way,
So everyone's
not the
in
first
I'm
person who
going
said
to
that.
cut this off now because everyone's entitled to their behavior, and I'll give credit to the sound. It's Colin Cowherd and Fox Sports there. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But if you watch Enes Kanter say that, and we talked about like this hot take behavior, we talked about this soundbite behavior. Listening to Enes Kanter, I don't think he believed the word he said. One, I think he was trying to take a shot at Julius Randle for whatever reason. And 2, he's almost giggling through the whole spiel there. And it's okay if you think Zion Williamson is overhyped. That's fine. But like, offer a concrete explanation as to why. And the fact that Cowherd is just sitting there cracking up, it's like, okay, these guys are trying to create sound bites. And I feel like that's what all of these shows do now is they don't, there's no substance to them. They just try to create sound bites. Like the fact that Ryan Hollins is still on TV after what he said last week is absurd. It just shows that ESPN doesn't really care same with Fox Sports. They don't really care what you're saying, but if what you're saying gets attention, we're going to run with it. If the clip, no matter how bad they're trashing you, if the clip of you saying Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant can't hold LeBron James' shoes gets retweeted or favorited or liked a bunch of times, no matter how bad they're trashing you on the other end of those comments, they think that that's good because it's a soundbite and it's going out there into the social media world. It's like, when did Max Kellerman turn heel? Like, I completely missed this. Max Kellerman was always kind of the level-headed, analytical guy on First Take, while Stephen A. Smith was the guy who flew off the handle. Now, suddenly, Max Kellerman has done a Hollywood Hogan heel turn where he's like trashing players. He's trashing Kevin Durant. He stopped trashing Kevin Durant after Kevin Durant got hurt. And apparently Max Kellerman's the only person on the planet who has a calf bone and an Achilles bone. Because if you ask him, he'll tell you that they're connected. I miss this. I miss this massive heel turn. But we're in this hot take society where if you throw out a take, it'll get out there on Twitter and it'll make the rounds. And that's what Enes Kanter is, right? Like he's a goofball. And I'm here for it. He's a social media savvy guy. He has fun with that stuff. Whether he believed it or he didn't, to call him Julius Randle with hops while offering no other substance to it is like, okay. So everybody else is wrong, but your take on Zion Williamson is right with absolutely nothing there to define how that's possible or to define why you feel that way. Enes Kanter is a big Paul Heyman guy. He's a professional wrestling guy, which is a beautiful segue, if I do say so myself, into a story I came across from Sports Illustrated this morning. So wrestling fans, check this out. WWE has named Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff as executive directors of the respective programs. Paul Heyman is said to become the executive director of Monday Night Raw, while Eric Bischoff will fill the same role for SmackDown Live. Both will report directly to WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon. Again, this is all courtesy of Sports Illustrated. So I thought, okay, this is just they're changing the title of the commissioner, right? They're changing the title of the general manager and they're calling it the executive director. Except when I got to this part of the article. The two positions are full-time executive roles with no plans at the current time for this to be introduced as part of a TV storyline. Oh, wait a minute. This is for real? This isn't for TV? Paul Heyman is running Monday Night Raw? And Eric Bischoff is running SmackDown? Really? Huh. So here we are in 2019. The guy who ran ECW and the guy who ran WCW, they're running WWE's television shows. Okie dokie. That's interesting. That is interesting. And in the end, what does this all really matter? I love Paul Heyman. I think he's got a brilliant mind. Eric Bischoff, that star burned really, really bright for a couple years. It didn't burn long, but man, it burned bright. Okay, I really don't know where to go with this. The bottom line is Vince McMahon is still in charge, and as long as Vince McMahon is still in charge, the product is always going to look the same. The product is terrible. I have not watched a single second of a current WWE product since WrestleMania. And I have watched very, very little WWE product since last year's WrestleMania. Is Paul Heyman going to change that? Like I said this to you the other week for wrestling fans, I don't know what could convince me to watch WWE. Like I don't know what storyline could happen. I don't know what they would introduce that would make me go, oh yeah, I've got to tune into this. I've got to see this. The business has changed a lot from what it was when I was a kid. And I was watching back in, WrestleMania 2 and 3, my earliest memories of wrestling. It's changed a great deal since 1997 and 1998 when that next big boom of wrestling hit in the Attitude Era in the WWE and the NWO era in WCW. It's changed greatly since then, and I'd argue it hasn't changed for the better. See, wrestling up until, maybe I was 20 or 21, it catered directly to me. Like when I was 4 years old and 5 years old and 6 years old, I was training, saying my prayers, eating my vitamins. I was a Hulkamaniac, and you had all of these cartoon characters around and the Ultimate Warrior and the Junkyard Dog and all of these guys. This catered directly to me. Then 93 came around. I got 13, 14, and Hogan was around. He was on his way out. He headed to WCW. It was there. It was a little bit goofy. The Heartbreak Kid started to emerge a little bit, which was cool. You had Big Daddy Cool Diesel. So at 15, 16 years old, it's like, okay, this is cool. I think Shawn Michaels, the boyhood dream has come true. I think that was 1996, WrestleMania 12. So I'm 16, and you got the Heartbreak Kid, this guy who was, talking about, was catering to all the women out there. It's like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, that's what I want to be. But then 97 came around, and you had this guy with, a bald head and a bad attitude, and he was throwing the middle finger around and using foul language. And then, 1998, The Rock rolled around, and it was like, oh, okay, this is me right here. And then you had Sable coming out in a bathing suit and Sonny coming out in a bathing suit. Now I'm 19, 20 years old. It's all about me. And then they switched it up, and that era kind of ended, and Austin and Rock, they went about their business, and things started to change, and they started to cater back to that younger audience that I was back in, the mid 80s. And it just didn't appeal to me anymore. It wasn't for me. The product isn't for me. But the thing about wrestling fans is they are deathly loyal. Wrestling fans will suffer through 5 hours of television a week. They will suffer through a brutal 4-hour pay-per-view, a 5-hour pay-per-view, in WrestleMania's case, a 7.5-hour pay-per-view, just to later complain about it. But they're fiercely loyal, and they don't want to leave it because they're hoping that one day it's going to be great again. Make wrestling great again. Make WWE great again. That's what they're hoping for. I ain't got the time for that. If something dope happens and y'all tell me about it, I'm there for it. Double or Nothing was motivating. Dude, that pay-per-view motivated me. If you ever saw that picture I posted shortly after being let go of the checklist that had, check with Deuce and Mo, tell the TV crew I love them. It was just a picture that I posted across social media platforms to kind of announce that I was going to do this podcast. If you ever saw that, that was a direct copy of something Cody Rhodes did after he left the WWE. And I put that together after seeing Double or Nothing, because to see what those individuals who put together Double or Nothing and formed All Elite Wrestling, what they did after leaving the major companies, it was incredible. It's been a one-company business, at least in America, for almost 2 decades now. ECW shut down, WCW shut down, and it's been WWE ever since. New Japan has just kind of started to get introduced over the last year or two to the United States crowd. And then you have All Elite Wrestling coming in and making their debut on TNT, a major network, something no one else was able to secure, something like TNA. I don't even count that. I've never seen an episode of or TNA or Impact Wrestling or whatever it's called. Never seen an episode of it. I know they were on like Spike TV for a short period of time. But when I had read about it, and it's like, okay, you're bringing in Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, the 1, 2, 3 Kid. Okay, I'm good. This is over. Like, I don't need this. I need something new. And that's what All Elite Wrestling is. It's new, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do, in October when they debut on TNT. And WWE is obviously very, very aware of this. And there's going to be I'm anxious. I'm anxious for this. And we'll see. Is Conrad Thompson, by the way, who I've mentioned, I listen to 3 of his 4 podcasts pretty regularly. He might be the most powerful man in wrestling, given that Bruce Pritchard had just fallen off the face. Like, no one was talking about him being involved in wrestling. And then he starts doing this podcast. This podcast gets wildly popular. He winds up on the WWE network, and then he winds up back in a creative position with the WWE. Eric Bischoff had been doing conventions and different wrestling things like that every, now and then. He was always the guy that ran WCW. He was always the guy that rode WCW into the ground. He gets a podcast. Now suddenly he has an executive director role with WWE. Jim Ross, he's had a podcast. Granted, his with Conrad Thompson just started. He's the lead voice for All Elite Wrestling. Conrad Thompson might be the most powerful man in professional wrestling. It's pretty amazing. But none of this is convincing me that WWE is going to be worth watching moving forward. A couple of other stories we've got to touch on here. I know we've hit this story. We've been on the podcast round for 4 weeks? This might be the 3rd week straight that this story has come up, or a story of this liking had come up. Remember the 2-year-old girl who was struck by a foul ball at Minute Maid Park? She suffered a skull fracture and had a seizure, a spokesperson for the family had said, and she's 2 years old, man. She was bleeding. She had brain contusions, all sorts of those things going on. And you look at that and you read that report and you're wondering what Rob Manfred has to say, right? The commissioner, what's he have to say? Yeah, nothing. He continues to have nothing to say about this. Big ups to the Chicago White Sox, and the Washington Nationals, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. All three of those teams have announced plans to expand safety netting from foul pole to foul pole. The Nationals, they're going to start their work during the All-Star break. Good for Washington, good for Chicago, and some of you may cringe at this, but good for the Los Angeles Dodgers. How about this? According to a survey commissioned by ESPN last week, Major League Baseball fans support installation of more safety netting at ballparks by a percentage of 78 to 22. 78% of baseball fans surveyed by ESPN say put up more safety netting. Rob Manfred continues to say nothing. Think about this moment right here. You had a 2-year-old girl get struck in the head. Wasn't enough. Wasn't enough to shake him. Wasn't enough to get Rob Manfred to say, you know what? They're almost at the point where they have to say, stop playing games. We're putting up installation now. We're pausing the Major League Baseball season, and we're putting installation up now. But that's not gonna happen until a 2-year-old or 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, a small child dies. Because an adult died and that wasn't enough. It's got to be a child. Okay? Remember this moment, Rob. Remember this moment. It's hard to shift into other baseball news after talking that story. I know I don't talk a lot of baseball here outside that baseball netting. It's hard because we're kind of in the middle of the season. It's not really a lot happening right now, but I can give you this. The Red Sox, they were 97-1 last year when leading in the 9th inning. 97-1. So far this year, they're 33-4. When leading entering the 9th inning, they've lost 4 games this season. That's tied for the most with the Baltimore Orioles. The Red Sox right now, they are 9 games back from the New York Yankees. They're 44-38. Oh, speaking of the New York Yankees,
Carlo is going on the IL. He was examined right before the game, and in conjunction with the physical exam and looking at the MRI, there's a PCL strain in there, so he is not going to go. He will go on the IL, and we'll reevaluate him in 10 days.
Yeah, they're going to reevaluate him in 10 days, but according to an alert that we got here as the podcast is going, Stanton is going to be out until August. So there you have it. That, of course, was New York Yankees manager Aaron Boone there. So they haven't suffered a bit. They're leading their division. They're rolling along, but it's tough when you pay that guy that amount of money and he can't stay on the field and he can't stay healthy. Oakland A's continue to roll. They beat the Cardinals yesterday 2-0, first time shutting out an opponent on the road. They've won 7 of their last 9 games. It's the podcast with Damian Barling, presented by Vibe Health Bar, Sacramento's premier superfood cafe with locations in East Sacramento, Oak Park, and Folsom. Vibe Health Bar is where busy people go to achieve vibrant health. For more information, stalk us at Vibe Health Bar. You can stalk me here on the text line at 916-888-5898. Again, that's a 24/7 text line. Whenever you're listening to this, day, night, middle of the night, graveyard shift, whatever it is, 916-888-5898. Of course, you can connect through all social media platforms as well. Search Damian Barling on Facebook. Give us a like there, and at Damian Barling on Instagram and Twitter. Our Patreon account is live. Thank you for those who have offered to support the show here so far. I'm trying to come up with incentives for people who support the show. I'm thinking about getting t-shirts made and all of those different things. But honestly, that whole Patreon account is going to be a process. And if anybody wants to get in and support the show, it's awesome. If not, we're going to make this work no matter what. You can also check out my website, DamianBarling.com. Let's go to some of your questions here. Of course, your questions can come across all of those platforms that we have there. A lot of people text in their thoughts regarding Willie Cauley-Stein yesterday, as we had put questions up on Facebook, and obviously we had a great deal of conversations going over the last couple of days regarding Willie Cauley-Stein. It seems it was actually kind of split. A lot of people just had different thoughts on what to do with him moving forward, and it felt like it was split between, oh, I'm fine if Willie Cauley-Stein is a part of the Sacramento Kings as long as it's for the right price. And then there were a lot of people who also said he doesn't want to be here. Let him go. It's kind of the end of the story. If he doesn't want to be here, let him go. Well, we'll see what the Sacramento Kings do. Like, tomorrow's going to be a lot of fun because it's going to be our last show before. I really do believe there's going to be a ton of announcements coming up on Sunday. There's going to be a ton of announcements when that 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time gets here, we're going to hear where big names are signing, and then we're just going to hear about when some meetings are taking place. But tomorrow is going to be a lot of fun because Josh Emmett is going to join us. UFC fighter is going to be a part of UFC Sacramento on July 13th. And, of course, he's going to be at Vibe Health Bar on Saturday as well. I'm going to be there also. So if you want to come hang out, get some smoothies, get some acai bowls, get some great food, make your way out to Folsom. And we'll be able to decipher for the last time. We'll be able to go through all of these rumors one more time and try to find the best fit for some of these players before everything starts taking shape this weekend. So as always, thank you so much for being with me here. Continue to tell your friends about the show. If you haven't rated the show yet, please do. If you haven't reviewed the show yet, please do. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you like what you're hearing, again, we're building a community here, man. Tell your friends, particularly Kings fans. Let your Kings friends know that local sports talk does exist. You just got to find it on the podcast platform. It's not on the radio. So tell them all about the podcast with Damian Barling. And again, reach out anytime you'd like. 916-888-5898. Make sure you support Vibe Health Bar. Make sure you use that promo code Barling Podcast to get a 15% discount at any of their 3 locations. And make sure that you are back with us here tomorrow on the podcast with Damian Barling.